Welcome back, everyone. We are reassembling for our afternoon program. Please take a seat. And while we are reassembling, I want to acknowledge some very special people who are here with us today. We have fellows, RISE Fellows from the American Society on Aging joining us. We have 7 future aging leaders in our company. A very special welcome to the 7 ASA RISE Fellows who are with us. Thank you, and thank you to ASA for partnering with the state of California. Oh, are you standing? There they are. We need you. I'm also very excited to share that we have 10 other states joining us. The Center for Healthcare Strategies has formed a learning collaborative. They received funding from some of our philanthropic partners. There's such great interest in establishing master plans for aging around the country that 10 states are with us today. A very special welcome to the 10 states that join us, and we'll be meeting with them tomorrow to share ideas and have an information exchange in an informal way. So a very special welcome to the 10 states that are joining us. We also have one of our most important federal partners here with us, our Region 9 Administration for Community Living, the Regional Administrator for Region 9 of the Administration on Community Living. Faye Gordon is here with us today, and I know Faye is probably somewhere in this room. There's Faye. Welcome, Faye. We're so glad that you're here. And Faye helped facilitate the video message that I'm so excited to share with you. Our acting administrator from the Administration for Community Living, Alison Barkoff, took the time to prepare a video. Many of us were with the acting administrator just a month ago at a national conference that included from California, our Department of Healthcare Services, our Department of Rehabilitation, our Department of Developmental Services, our Department of Aging, and I'm probably forgetting one. So we had a wonderful cross-section of departments from the Health and Human Services who got to meet with the acting administrator, Alison Barkoff, just last month. And now, while you're finishing up your lunch, we will be viewing a video from Alison Barkoff. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Alison Barkoff, and I am the Acting Administrator and Assistant Secretary for Aging at the Administration for Community Living in the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Thank you so much for this privilege to be with you, albeit virtually. Thank you so much to Director Susan DeMorris for inviting me. And I want to thank you and your team for all of the work and planning that went into this dynamic day. I love that your event title calls out 2 goals: a California for all ages and abilities, and a day of action. These priorities totally align with our mission at ACL, where we are laser focused on ensuring that all people have opportunities to fully participate in their communities and be included in all aspects of life, regardless of age, type of disability, or level of support needed. I know that you not only share this goal, but that you're acting on it every day. In your visionary master plan for aging, where the state and stakeholders develop partnerships between the aging and disability networks, you have set a model for real-world solutions that are being replicated in other states. The work in California is forward-thinking, and it's been so impressive throughout the COVID-19 pandemic's unprecedented challenges. Thank you to all of the state staff and local organizations for the life-saving work you have been doing, providing critical supports to older adults and people with disabilities throughout the pandemic, while at the same time grieving with and advocating for the communities you serve. California has been remarkable in identifying tangible ways to support the state's underserved communities, a goal that is strongly shared by ACL, all of HHS, and the Biden-Harris administration. Like California, we view all of our programs through an intersectional equity lens, ensuring that we are identifying and addressing barriers faced by older adults and people with disabilities who are from communities of color or tribal communities, don't speak English as a first language, are LGBTQI+, or economically disadvantaged, or from rural areas. These are values we must share as a nation to ensure that those with the greatest social and economic needs have access to the full array of services and supports that will allow them to live full and independent lives in the community. I am so encouraged to see California's state leadership involved in executing the Master Plan on Aging and participating in today's Day of Action. I want to commend Governor Newsom, your Health and Human Services Agency leadership, including Secretary Ghali, Susan and the entire Department of Aging, and most importantly, all of the local leaders, stakeholders, foundations, and everyone else here today who shared their lived experiences and helped produce a roadmap that all Californians can be proud to follow. I know that all of you are here today to look forward, to look ahead to the next 2 years of initiatives. I really commend you for not viewing the current plan as the end goal, but as the work of continuous improvement and as something that requires real action to be realized. So as you look forward, it's going to be important to continue your groundbreaking work to bring the aging and disability networks together and to build more partnerships, to continue fully considering the ways to work more effectively on social determinants of health, to find new remedies for the stubborn problem related to the lack of affordable and accessible housing, to continue to tackle the need for so much better and more accessible transportation, to work together with all of us to support family caregivers and begin to strengthen and address the direct care workforce crisis, and that we make sure we identify the needs of specific populations, whether we're talking about people with dementia or intellectual and developmental disabilities. We need to make sure everyone's needs are met. Your efforts in California to build a no wrong door system for all ages and across disabilities is an example of how your collaborative spirit can result in person-centered services that make a real difference in a person's life. And I really want to congratulate you on being one of 10 states that just this month ACO awarded a No Wrong Door governance grant to. As you look forward, I encourage you to think about how you can expand on your successes so that everyone who wants to live in the community can find a place they call home. I'm so proud to collaborate with you on your inclusive approach to aging and disability. And I know ACL staff in Washington, D.C. feels the same, as does our regional administrator, Faye Gordon. Faye keeps me informed on all of your accomplishments, and I'm so pleased she's with you today and never shy about pointing out all of your many successes. Let me thank all of you who are here today for your service to others, to your state, and to our country. We are stronger because of your tireless efforts to create an inclusive society where everyone has the opportunity to live and thrive in the community of their choice. Thank you so much for all you are doing.
Faye, please extend our appreciation to Alison for her remarks and her kind words, and for the grant that we received last week for the No Wrong Door system. And there's an update even to her remarks. California received a second ACL grant after this was taped for their Alzheimer's disease program, and we'll be working with community health workers in 3 counties, Imperial, Ventura, and Marin counties, focused on the Alzheimer's and dementia populations. In addition, tomorrow, ACL will be launching the National Caregiving Strategy, and we are eager to see that released tomorrow and to do our part in California to achieve the goals that are set forth by the Biden administration. So thank you. I also am remiss in acknowledging the members of the California Senior Legislature who are with us, and I know there are many here today, and we appreciate your partnership and your participation in today's event. It is now my pleasure to welcome to the stage Director Joe Xavier, who leads the California Department of Rehabilitation. We've invited Joe to share his thoughts on the importance of aligning aging and disability as a key element of Master Plan for Aging implementation. And I'm so happy, Joe, to welcome you here to the stage, and I look forward to hearing what you have to say. Thank you for being here.
I think I found the microphone. Well, good morning, or good afternoon, I should say. It's my reoccurring line that I say good morning at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So, are you guys getting the feedback, or is it just myself? Okay. So, first of all, it's just been an amazing morning, and you're in for an amazing afternoon with a couple of panels and other things that are taking place. So as I sat here this morning listening to the presentation, I just kept playing over and over in my head our keynote speaker's presentation because it so resonated with me. It did such an awesome job of speaking to ageism and ableism in a way that said we are one person that may have different experiences. One of the things that I heard throughout the morning was the coordination, the collaboration, and the partnership that is reoccurring across so many different systems and within systems. So today, as I offer you a couple of my thoughts, they're not aimed just at us who are in this room and those that are listening online who are believers, but really how do we, society as a whole, more holistic embrace age and disability as being part of the same experience. If you were born with a disability and you were fortunate, you're going to age and become an elder adult, okay? If you were born without a disability, you're also going to age, and if you're fortunate, you're going to age and you're going to also experience some of those very limitations, okay? However, people that are aging without the disability are hesitant to call them disabilities. People that have aged with disabilities embrace those limitations very early on. As someone who grew up with a disability from birth, I'm experiencing firsthand aging with that disability and what that process is like. And as a son, one of 8 kids, I have a front row seat into my mother's aging and the limitations that she is facing as she's aged. Today, I've heard disability included in the conversation more than any time that I can recall. It's simply amazing. However, the conversations now must truly normalize disability into the fabric of society across the whole of society. Individuals with disabilities have the same hopes and dreams as individuals without disabilities. We want jobs where employers believe in our talent and our potential. We want the opportunity to live in our community of choice with purpose and dignity. And we know that employment and living in a community of choice are the opposite sides of the same coin and very, very often require the same supports. Employment is a social determinant of health. And if I am aging and I have had the benefit of employment, I also have a different trajectory because of the assets that I can accumulate. If you are aging in the workplace, the limitations that you may start to experience can impact your work performance. The limitations may impact your ability to live in your community of choice and engage with the environment that you have engaged with. And it may require that you learn how to perform functions in a little bit of a different way. It may require that you may need accommodations to perform those functions. But here's the good news. Individuals with disabilities have identified a lot of what those adaptations are. They've even have various technologies that have been developed as a result of addressing the need for those adaptations. So why is it that we in the disability community cannot share and should not share those adaptations with individuals who may be aging in the workplace and need those same accommodations, need those same flexibilities to continue to perform their jobs? And finally, let me just say a couple things about society's attitude. We heard a lot of it this morning, but I want to amplify a couple of these. One, if we're all here today, we're all going to have the benefit of aging, God willing, right? But as you age, for those of us who may not have disabilities, as you age, you're going to experience additional limitations, right? I've already said this, right? Now, the question is, what do you want your life to be as an adult that may experience those limitations? What do you want to experience as an adult that can face those limitations? I want to tell you a quick story about how aging and disability can come together and the conversations that take place. A number of years ago, while my mom was still driving, her cataracts were really becoming a problem for her to continue driving, and she had to go in for surgery. And I was having a conversation with her, and she just wasn't her typical self. I says, Mom, what's going on? She goes, you know I have to go have my cataracts removed. I said, yes. That's a good thing. She goes, yeah, I know. But what if I can't drive? I said, I'm sorry, what did you say? She goes, what if I can't drive? And she goes, oh, you're not the right person to be talking to about this. I says, no, really, Mom. I'm the only one of your 8 kids that really understands this issue. After all, I've been living with it. She says, yeah, that's right, right? But we have that experience. We can each benefit from sharing that path, that experiences that we have, right? And another thing that we need to contend with as we talk about disability and aging, right? Because today, in many, many places in our society, disability is still viewed as being worse than death. How many times have we heard, I would rather be dead than, put a label on it. I don't want to be a burden. How many times have we heard that? But here's the question. Imagine being a child with a disability and not only hearing those statements, but feeling the impact of those statements as you go through life. How does that start to impact how I might believe in myself, what I can or cannot do? As we engage in these conversations that are so inclusive of disability, I truly look forward to the day where our conversations will normalize disability into the fabric of everything that we are doing, okay? Thank you very much. I want to now introduce our next speaker, Joey Travolta. So Joey has many, many accomplishments in his career, right? He's been a special education teacher. He's been a filmmaker. He's been providing training to countless individuals with disabilities for them to go to work, particularly youth with disabilities. But the most noteworthy accomplishment that Joey has, in my opinion, is his staunch belief in the potential and in the talent of youth with disabilities to go to work, become gainfully employed, and be that part of society. And if you really want to be in awe of something, is to watch Joey at one of his film camps engage a group of teenagers with disabilities, command their attention, get their interest, and get them all, here's the key with teenagers, focused on the same thing at the same time, right? Here to share about the film that he has produced for today's event, a friend and partner, Joey Travolta. Are we going this way?
Yep, to the left.
Wow. Thank you, Joe. That was, I'm almost crying over there. I've been trying to break, well, first of all, I was blow drying my hair this morning thinking about what I'm going to talk about. And then I said, that ship has passed, don't worry about it, don't dry your hair. The purpose of what we do is to employ folks that are neurodiverse. We have 7 studios training, and now we're getting the job. So the video that you're going to see, I would say 8 out of the 10 people that worked on it and 3 out of the 4 that did post were all people that have gone through the program and have been out on the road working with us. Those doors are breaking down. And the great thing is I've always wanted to connect seniors and folks that are neurodiverse because we have so much that we can learn from each other. My dad always taught us to respect the elderly. And now I'm a part of the club. I'm going to be 72 in October, and this is the busiest year that I've ever had in my life. And I've done like 7 camps in a summer, and it's just exciting to be here. And I'm just going to tell one quick story because I know most of you probably heard of Temple Grandin. Recently, I had the pleasure of going to Colorado to interview her. And I took 7 of our folks, and we were sitting down, and I said, Temple, I said, I want to tell you before we get started, this is the most important interview of my life. I have such respect for you for the work aspect of what you do, and the way she thinks is in pictures. That's the way most people with autism think, in pictures. So filmmaking, it's moving pictures. So it makes it even easier. So I said, but before we get started, I said, see the cameraman behind me? And the cameraman over there? And the 2 grip and electric there? And the sound guy? They're all on the spectrum. And she said to me, she looked at me and said, well, you got to do more. You got to hire more people. I said, I'm trying. She says, do car commercials, do car commercials. Anyway, thank you, Joe. It's working with the regional centers and Department of Rehab, and now with the Department of Aging and SCAN and the Disabilities Council, we're getting the work. There's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of video production to be done. And we got a nice crew. We have 7 studios around the state that all are involved with this. And it's exciting. So I'm not going to say any more. Let's take a look at the film. Is that now time to do that? Yeah, okay. Thank you.
California is leading the nation with our master plan for aging. We are looking forward to the year 2030 when 1 in 4 Californians will be age 60 or older.
The master plan allows us to bring about transformative change, and it established a vision for California, a California for all ages and abilities.
We've made tremendous progress, but it's also important that in addition to celebrating that progress, that we recognize that we have a long way to go to get to that true place where we all feel equal, feel welcome, feel that we are truly part of the greater society, the greater whole.
My disability is I am a hemiplegic. In other words, I'm totally paralyzed, in this case, my right side. The reason for that is because I had a brain bleed, which caused the left brain to totally be destroyed. Not only does it not bother me, I cannot feel it. I cannot experience it because my body does not allow me to feel pain. I appreciate folks who want to do and care for me. They said, well, we'll make your bed. I said, no, I want to do it because that is part of me that tells me that I can still function.
We have been married for 65 years. Since about 7 years ago, she had dialysis.
He take care of me, and my son take care of me.
Clean house and all the housework.
I got a few hundred social security, so I can afford to hire someone to take care of me.
Myself as a person who's been blind all my life, it's just part of who I am. But I think it's important to recognize that disability is individualized experience different by every person. So the fact that I'm blind doesn't mean that the next blind person experiences blindness in the same way, as an example.
The other barrier that I think that's important to understand with old people is that we don't often get to do a lot of things that we want to do, okay? My biggest barrier is transportation. It's a burden because of the transportation. I have to get on a bus, the trolley, and an hour to and from, and it drains me.
We here in California have a very good system that makes it possible for us as we age to get proper care and housing and such, but there's still a lot of homelessness.
When I became homeless, I lived downtown. Outside of McDonald's is a commercial green electrical box, right in front of the bus stop. I slept on top of that for 2.5 years, not knowing anything. I had a good life, and then you get snapped. What do you do? Where do you go?
My sister up in LA called me one day and she needed help with my dad. So I left my house here and I went up there to help her. I stayed up there for a little while. Then he passed away, so I came back down here and I was living at my brother's ranch, but it got sold, so from there it was hard. There were a couple of times I ended up staying in my friend's car. I didn't realize it because I wasn't going to the doctors as I should have until I had a minor stroke myself. And then through my friends up at Talmadge, they helped me get into a program, the PACE program, being in a helpless situation. Ooh, doesn't feel nice.
My mom's name was Linda, and she was a single parent and just one of the most amazing people that I have ever known. And it was about a year after I started a graduate program that she was actually diagnosed with an aggressive form of breast cancer. She wanted to age in place, she wanted to age at home, and she made it very clear to me that she wanted to die at home. After this very, very short window of time where we thought things were gonna be okay, I learned, my role as a caregiver was not over. My mom still needed me, and this time around, things were going to get significantly worse. She was going to decline, and it was going to be painful.
I think a lot of people think, well, it's not going to be as exhausting as it is. And they think, well, I love this person, I can take care of them. In your mind, how it's going to be and the reality of it is very, very, very different.
Basically, what needs to happen is the caregiver themselves, they need to know if they can do the job. They need to know right up front what exactly they're going to be doing. But if you have an honest desire to care about another person and do the manual labor, great, we need you.
My husband had Alzheimer's for 10 years. He was a very smart man. He was an architect. And when he was still good, he also got the diagnosis that he had cancer. But I didn't realize how close he was to dying. And Del Oro helped me and got me some respite.
People need people. And I think it's really important for us to see the aging process. It's not something that should be hidden away. It's actually something that is really important for reminding us of our need of each other.
You can't sit at home and feel sorry for yourself. You've got to realize that you're getting up in age and that you got to stay active, and that's the way I look at it.
And you've got to have an outstanding sex life.
Our elders have so much wisdom and so much experience to offer us, and I think everybody deserves to be able to age with dignity.
2030 looks like a time or era where we have consumers coming to us to say, I like this change that's been made.
And when we talk about a California for all, that truly must mean all, exception none. We leave no one behind.
But the population is growing. We will need more services, more home and community-based services, and more services that are tailored to our diverse population by 2030. Our hope is by that year, everything will be well in place to meet the demands of a growing population. Thank you, Joey and Inclusion Films, your team who filmed, and especially the stars of the film, several of whom are here with us today. That was very impactful, and you really captured the reality of so many Californians today, and you gave new meaning and purpose to our master plan work. Thank you. Thank you very much for your film. At this time, I would like to invite 3 of the individuals who were featured in the film to join us on the stage. Brenda Boles, Nora Elam, and Simone Nazzal. If you would come forward. Joe, Xavier, and I are going to spend a bit of time with them, bringing their stories to life here on the stage, and we appreciate very much that you took the time to be with us here today. Is joining us.
I've read this week. I'm sitting on my name tag. Can I get this to you? I think there's that.
So you recognize them from the film. So we have Simone and Brenda, and Nora's joining us. And we're going to ask Joe to start us off. While Nora comes to the stage.
Is Nora on the stage?
Everybody's on it now. Okay, I'm seated now.
All right. Welcome.
So everyone is seated now. Joe, please start our panel off.
Well, welcome. It's great to have all of you here, and thank you for sharing your stories. We look forward to this conversation. It's just a conversation. A trick that I've learned, just if the audience bothers you, just close your eyes. Right? You can't see them, right? So, Nora, why don't we start with you? So, your story is quite unique because you have both experienced from the consumer side as well as the provider side. So we'd love to hear more about what you have learned in accessing services to support yourself And then what would you like to change given the opportunity to do so?
I was not born with a disability. I got mine later. This is really emotional for me, I'm sorry. It's really weird to see yourself on the screen. Anyway, my problem started in 1995. I was diagnosed with diabetes, and then going forward, there's at least 7 other medical conditions I got. And because I was a caregiver, I was very educated on what kind of resources are available. And about 2018 is when I started reliving my life. In 2013, I got on disability, and I had no idea what I was going to do with my life. I was scared to death. But in 2018, I was introduced to the Department of Rehabilitation. They got me to Society for the Blind, which after I graduated, I went to Resources for Independent Living. And I got a lot of help and support. My beautiful daughter is my caregiver. And sometimes it's real embarrassing to have your loved one do things to help you. Thank you. But the kind of person I am is I don't give up. I have a right to live the best way I can. And if others cannot accept that, then please turn around and walk away from me. But I'm here because I wanted to be in this film, because I wanted to give the compassion that everybody needs. And this California for All Ages is an awesome title because we all need each other. I'm here because I want to cultivate relationships. I am here because I want to teach self-advocacy. But I'm also here because I honestly can say I love you, and I am thankful for the committees, for all that, the help that has been given, and they're still continuing to fight, and that California for All Ages has put a new light on an old problem instead of complaining about it. They're making solutions and moving forward. So I applaud you for all of that. And let's cultivate relationships. Let's advocate for self.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to turn to Brenda now. In the film, you really touched me. I was a caregiver for my dad who had serious heart disease starting when I was in high school. And I remember being in over my head and researching on the internet and discovering a book, a common book called The Little Blue Book about the end of life. And within 10 days, we lost our dad. And I had no idea after, 50, he'd been 30 years battling heart disease and many surgeries, and it still caught us all by surprise. So you really touched my heart when you said, you didn't know how hard it would be. Can you walk us through your experience? You had cancer and Alzheimer's disease. You were called to do a lot as a caregiver. Can you share with us what was going on in your home?
Sure. In the video, Nora also said that if you're going to be a caregiver, you really should know what you're getting into. And I mean, you don't really have a choice. If it's there, you have to do it. But I had no idea how exhausting it would be. And it's one thing if your case is different because your parent, you still lived with your parent, but older people have parents that have Alzheimer's, and they say, oh, I know what it's like, but they really don't unless you've lived with a person, because it's 24 hours and you know, you don't get any rest. And he had Alzheimer's for 10 years before he died. But before he got really bad, he found out he had cancer. And he chose not to have any treatment because he hated the Alzheimer's and he knew that cancer would take him quicker. So he almost like he had an exit plan. But I had no idea how exhausted I was until it was over. And then for about 3 months, all I could do was sit, because it's all consuming. I mean, that's all on your mind, day and night, even dreams. I remember going somewhere and always worrying what was happening at home. And so I would say, if you have a situation like that and you know it's going to be long-term, get help as soon as you can. And people always think, well, I can't afford it, I can't afford it. You really cannot not afford to do it, because that's part of self-care. And you really need self-care if you're going through, you know, a real difficult thing. And I don't mean to be negative about it. I just want it to be real. That's the reality.
Simone, how did you balance your day-to-day and your week-to-week, both with your personal needs as well as with your role as a caregiver for your mom? And we'd love to hear how you ended up in your current job at Del Oro, and what are the biggest areas of opportunities that you see for change?
Yeah, can you hear me okay? All of those are good questions.
I'm sitting right next to you.
I have a lot of thoughts, and I'll try to answer all of these really good questions as comprehensively as I can. I want to say that as far as self-care, when I began my caregiving journey, I wasn't very good at it. I didn't really even have a concept of it. And I think what was challenging for me was that I assumed I could do everything in my own strength. I assumed because I loved my mother and I came from her that I was the only person that could take care of her and could support her through this experience that she was having. And I just sort of came to the end of myself at a certain point. We can call it burnout. That's very commonly experienced among caregivers. But I think what agencies like Del Oro helped me understand is that being limited in what I can do for another person is not a bad thing. Learning how to take care of myself and prioritize that is not a bad thing. Accepting my own limitations is not a bad thing. And I've heard that word a lot today, limitations. And I've heard the word interdependence a lot today. And these are two terms that I know tend to get a lot of flack in our culture because there's so much of an emphasis on individualism and bootstrap mentality. And I think what caregiving taught me, and caregiving within the context of having support from Del Oro, from my church community, from friends and fictive kin, what that taught me is that we need one another, and that limitation is not something that is inherently negative. This is something I still struggle with because I often want to do things in my own strength. I often want to do more than I actually can. Just ask my boss, Michelle. She's right over there. And it's something I struggle with. But, you know, to your point, when you were sharing about your daughter, you may not recognize the gift you're giving her in allowing her to support you in the way that she's doing, because I know that I learned more from my mother, and from that caregiving experience, I learned more from that than I would have in a graduate program in any other context. And what was really important was learning that I am limited, that I'm not superhuman, and that that's okay, because that means that, one, I need to care for myself, and two, I exist within an ecosystem where I need to depend on other people. And the good part about that is that there's give and take. I mean, when I can't care for myself in my own strength, and people step up to support me as a caregiver as I'm caring for my mom, there's a time when I can pay that forward. It's interdependence is not a bad thing. Limitation is not a bad thing. Those are actually the things that I think help us understand that we're human beings and keep us most grounded. But I will say that I would have been able to make meaning of my experience as a caregiver and arrive at these conclusions if I hadn't had support, if there hadn't been infrastructure and community services in place to let me know that I wasn't alone. Because when you feel alienated, when you feel isolated, it just reinforces that idea that you have to do everything in your own strength. And I think that, you know, what led me to back to Del Oro after my mom passed away, it's been about 8 years now, was just the incredible learning experience that was caregiving, and a desire to support caregivers as I had been supported, and this amazing opportunity to develop educational programming to teach people skills that they didn't have. To Brenda's point, I didn't know what I was doing when I was a caregiver. When I started out, I was in my 20s too. I didn't know anything. So I love that there's an opportunity to teach people about caregiving as a holistic experience, as being part of a community, as engaging in self-care, and really accept the fact that limitation is not inherently a bad thing. When you're experiencing or on the edge of burnout, that's not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of your need for support. And that is not weak, that's human, that's natural. So I love that I get to do that in my job, and I love my job, and I believe in this agency, and I think what I would hope for the future is just to see an expansion of local and grassroots agencies that can provide the kind of support for caregivers in their communities, in their natural element, can help them to understand that they're not alone and that they don't have to do everything in their own strength. And really give them a sense of the importance of interdependence. I mean, I love that that's been the buzzword for today. I know Gavin Newsom really likes the word robust. At least that's become a popular term around our office. Shout out to Gavin Newsom. I hope interdependence also takes off too after today's conference.
Given that we're all interdependent, I love how you said pay it forward. And I'd like to hear from each of you. When the phone rang and someone said, would you consider being in a film? and take your precious time and travel to be filmed. And then when the second call came to be on this panel, to take more of your time, tell us why you said yes. Why is it important for you to be here?
Well,
I guess I'll start. I did not get a phone call. I actually got an email. First thing that happened was, yes, I'm going to do this. I understood what it was for. And then when I got the okay to be on the speaker panel, I got really excited because caregiving is my passion. I enjoy taking care of people. I enjoy being around them. But what I don't like is what that author talked about, which I can't remember her name, the ageism, ableism, how really bad it's gotten. I watched my father die slowly. It was not easy to deal with that, and this is a man that was very proud. He did not want care. He wanted to do everything on his own. That's another reason I did this film, was because I have a wealth of experience, but so does everybody else in this room. And if we learn to cultivate relationships, do the networking, but cultivate like a garden, we will be the power force to drive what we all need. But guess what? There's an added bonus. As the caregiver is bringing in or coming to the client to heal or help the client, that's part of healing. The caregiver gets the healing as well. So as we're all being inclusive and working with one another and accepting our limitations, it's healing. Your body is going to love you because the bad stuff resonates in the spine. And then when it comes up, there, because of triggers, trauma is induced. So yeah, cultivate relationships, but especially like what she was referring to is to advocate for self. Because when you get burnout, believe me, you don't want to end up on the floor. You want to be able to take care of your loved ones. Guess what? You got to take care of yourself first.
That's an important, very important message. Brenda, how about you? Why did you say yes?
Well, first of all, I was really surprised. And then I started thinking, I was so fortunate to learn about Del Oro, Caregivers Resource Center. And when I think about all the things and ways they helped me, I thought, that's my opportunity to tell you people some of the things that I learned through them. And I'll tell you, I'll be ever grateful to Del Oro. And I mean, did you want me to tell some of the things, or are we talking about it later?
Please.
Oh,
Please
okay.
share some of the things you learned.
Okay, like they gave me also, besides respite, which is so important, they also gave me counseling. And when you're going through all this stuff and you don't really know what to do, and it's almost like I became a different person. I no longer had a smile on my face. I lost my joy because it's so all-consuming. And so when I had respite, they told me one thing that I thought was so important that I want to share with all of you, because this could happen to you. There was one time when my husband, he was wearing a diaper, a Depend, and because it's wicking, he doesn't feel how wet it is. And so it was like a loaded diaper. And the smell was very strong. And I wanted him to change the diaper, the Depends. And he didn't want to do it. And I just kept saying, Gordon, it really is full. And he says, no, it isn't. No, it isn't. And I didn't know what to do. At that point, I didn't have a caregiver. And I didn't know what to do. And I said, Gordon, you have to change it. And I was yelling at him. And he finally took it off, and instead of taking it up, he threw it on the carpet face down, all wet. I was so upset. This is the only time I felt like pushing him. I didn't know what to do. I was so frustrated. So I told my counselor, because I had a session, and this is what I want you all to know. You just do it one time. If I told her that I wanted to push him, and she said, it's so good that you did not, because if you came to talk to me and I heard you pushed him, even if it's only one time, it would be forever on my records as elder abuse. And I thought that, I was so thankful I didn't. But I'll tell you, I was close to it. I was so frustrated. So that's a really important thing I want to share with you, that, you know, get counseling. There's no shame in talking to a therapist. If you need help, I mean, I wanted to do the best job I could, but you know, there were times when I failed, when I got so frustrated, when I yelled at him. And the poor man, he didn't know.
And you're human. Thank you for sharing such raw experience. And many of us in this room will have that experience, and we will remember your words. Thank you. And we heard how behavioral health is a focus. We heard that this morning, and thank you for endorsing the value of counseling and how it helped you and you benefited personally. That took a lot of courage. Thank you.
So one quick question for either of you. We've talked a lot about learning, and a lot of the folks engaged in this work are really focused on how to improve policy and how to improve systems overall. So as you think about your own experiences, tell us, what's the one thing you had to unlearn to be the caregiver that you became?
Do you want me to take this one?
Sure.
And then I'll pass it over to you. Do you want to start?
No.
Are you sure?
I just don't have to film it.
Which was excellent, by the way.
Thank you.
Unlearning. So before I came to Del Oro, as their education coordinator and now the education and outreach coordinator, I was actually a public school teacher. And I started out by working as an aide in classrooms, working with students with special needs, working with students from challenging backgrounds, challenging home situations. And school had always felt like a safe and easy place for me to thrive. I understood school. I felt like it was a place I could be successful. And in working with children who did not feel the same way, I learned that not all systems are set up to ensure the success of everyone. And that just because I experience success in a certain system, it doesn't necessarily mean that the next person is going to. And that gave me pause. That I firmly believe that, you know, knowledge is power. I still believe in that, even though it's cliche to say now. But I think that the way that we've sort of framed learning and education for a long time has neglected the abilities and unique abilities and gifts of different kinds of learners, and different kinds of experiences. And as a former teacher, I can tell you that a lot of teachers who enter into that profession are caregivers at heart. They do it because they want to care for people's children. They want to see them grow and be successful. And that context is not without many challenges. And I think what I learned as a teacher that I had to unlearn was this sense that, or what I'm still unlearning, I guess, I need to be completely honest here. That I can only do so much as a single person, right? Again, I'm returning to this idea of limitation. And that's not the messaging that I got when I was growing up as a student. It was not the messaging that I got as I was preparing to teach. The idea is that you're gonna be a champion, you're gonna be a superhuman, you're gonna do everything for these kids. And the desire is good, but is it realistic? Is it something that's actually tenable, given the fact that teachers are human beings? And I think about, Brenda's anecdote, and thank you for your transparency and your rawness. Like, the expectation that all caregivers are just going to be able to smile and do their work without, and do their work in supporting another person without there being a toll taken on them, that's not fair. That's not right. And if entire systems hinge on the idea that caregivers are going to be able to support individuals who have high level of need for long periods of time without support, then that is wrong. That is incorrect. And that needs to change. We have resources. We have things that are working. I think we just need to focus on how to expand those things that are working. I think that grassroots agencies, I think that community agencies that support individual caregivers are great models for, what we can do. And I would say that in having unlearned that I have to be superhuman, I think there are other areas in, I think we need to shift our mindset about how people should be able to do things on their own, at a systemic level, because it's very hard to come to that realization as an individual that I am limited and therefore need help and therefore go out and seek support if systemically speaking, societally speaking, the messaging is, well, you just have to keep pushing. You just have to try harder. You just have to. That messaging is so strong and runs so deep that even with my experience in caring for my mom, even with the things that I've learned and unlearned, it's still a battle within me to actually live that out. Does that make sense?
Simone, I'm going to lean into your comments for this, for our close. We've reached our time, sadly.
Okay,
but I think what you just shared is true of this entire audience of superheroes, champions, advocates, allies who are fighting for justice, and older adults, people with disabilities, and caregivers during a pandemic. And so what wise words to this entire audience, whether a government partner, a nonprofit organization, an area agency on aging. This is a room full of people who push themselves to change systems. What wise words for all of us to hear as individuals, whether we're caring for a loved one or a program or a system, to take care of ourselves. Thank you. Thank you for wrapping with those words that intersect all of us and show our interdependence. I want to thank especially our three panelists. Thank you so much, Brenda, Nora, Simone.
Joey. Thank you. Your video was great. Thank you.
I join the audience in standing to thank you for sharing your stories. And I thank Joey Travolta and Director Joe Xavier also for being part of this panel. And we will share this film with everyone if you want to show it to your group or organization. So thank you all. Thank you, Joe. I would like to end on that note, but we're not going to, because that was really, really powerful. Thank you again to our panelists, and I have a strong suspicion that they will be with us in our advocacy here in Sacramento beyond today's day of action. I also want to acknowledge a very special gentleman, Paul Kwong, who was in the video, has joined us today but was not on stage. Paul, are you still here this afternoon? If you are, Paul, thank you for being in the film and thank you for joining us today. We're very happy that you're here. Thank you. And now we're going to invite our next panel to join us. We're really excited to have Eric Harris, Director of Public Policy at Disability Rights California, join us, and a co-chair of the Disability Aging and Community Living Advisory Committee. Eric is going to lead a conversation with policy and budget staff on how we can best advance system change through the Master Plan for Aging. They're getting mic'd as we speak. Another time to shift in your seats and wiggle around a little bit. It'll take us just a minute here to equip all of our panelists with microphones. But I will let you know we are proud to have Jackie Barocio with the Legislative Analyst's Office, Liz Fuller, who joins us from the Assembly Aging and Long-Term Care Committee, Scott Ogus, who joins us from the Senate. Senate Budget Committee. Great, we'll give our panelists just a minute to get situated, and then we can't wait to hear from our policy and budget leaders. All right, so in advance, I will thank Eric Harris for moderating this panel and thank our three panelists for joining. We're delighted that you're here. And take it away, Eric.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here with everyone. My name is Eric Harris. I am the Director of Public Policy at Disability Rights California. I'm also proud to be one of the co-chairs of the Disability and Aging Community Living Advisory Committee over on this corner over here. And I'm also on the State Independent Living Council here in the state. And first, I'd like to start off by thanking a couple of people. I want to thank Kim McCoy-Wade of the Governor's Office for being a leader and champion on disability-related issues, of course, aging and Alzheimer's as well. I want to thank Susan DeMorris for being a leader as well in the aging side and always thinking about disability and how we can work together. And I want to thank Secretary Mark Galley, who's always had an open door when it's come to working with the disability community, and that's been really crucial to a lot of the work of advocates throughout the state who work on behalf of people with disabilities. And with that, I'd like to give a quick description of myself. So I'm an African-American male, medium to dark brown skin. I have short black hair. I have a beard and mustache. And I'm currently wearing a blue blazer with a blue tie. And I have on glasses as well. And I'm really happy to be here with everyone today. And so our panel has some incredible leaders on it, and I'm looking forward to having a discussion with them. I'll give their brief introductions. So first we're going to start with Scott Ogus. He is the Deputy Staff Director of the Senate Committee on Budget and Fiscal Review. Hello, Scott.
Thank you.
Next we have Liz Fuller, who is the Chief Consultant in the Assembly Committee on Aging and Long-Term Care.
Right, okay. Thank you.
And then we have Jackie Barocio, who is the Principal Fiscal and Policy Analyst at the Legislative Analyst Office. So we're going to get started with just a couple of questions for each of you all to answer, and then anybody can chime in after we get some responses. So first I'm going to start with Jackie. The COVID-19 pandemic showed many issues impacting older adults and people with disabilities, particularly in the Black, Latino, Indigenous, Asian Pacific Islander communities, who are among the hardest hit. What are your thoughts on how we can ensure accountability not only for the Master Plan for Aging implementation, but also for how we measure our success in elevating equity as a state? And what are some considerations for how we operationalize and measure equity?
So thanks, Eric, for that question. I don't know if you all are familiar with our office, the Legislative Analyst Office. We essentially advise members of the legislature on various policy and budget issues and really try to channel their priorities in doing our analytical work. And in recent years, especially due to COVID-19, really elevating the inequities within the system and within our state of California, the legislature has really made it a point to emphasize that equity is a priority as they're thinking through budget and policy options. So in doing our work, our office, we've really tried to develop an understanding of how do we embed equity in our own analysis and our own recommendations. And I know we're not alone in this. Clearly, Master Plan for Aging stakeholder groups, the Department of Aging and its partners, along with the administration, are also on this equity journey as well. And when it comes to how do we operationalize equity, something that our office, and again, we're not alone in this, I know the administration has done also some thinking on this, and it's come up in today's sessions as well, is in doing equity work, ensuring that it is baked in within the process and not sprinkled after the fact. And the way that we think about it, or we've talked about it in our office, is, well, how do you bake in equity? And really starting with that problem statement. What is the issue that you've identified? It could be an access issue, it could be an adequacy issue, it could be a quality of care issue. Defining that problem in equity terms from the beginning. So if it's an access issue, I know Assemblymember Arambula discussed today that Latinos with disabilities, they are more likely to get less resources than their white counterparts. So looking at that access issue, but applying an equity lens. It could be a racial lens, it could be a geographical lens. A similar Assemblymember Arambula again mentioned today, workforce issues are particularly acute within the Central Valley, but we know that that's a statewide issue as well. So then in applying those equity lenses, those different ways in breaking down the problem, that will then help in ensuring that the solution is targeted in an equitable way.
Other things to consider that we've kind of thought about as we're making our way through that analytical process of putting together a recommendation is, okay, we have our problem defined in an equity way. What are other questions that we can think about as we're formulating a solution? And we know that the administration, the Department of Finance in particular, where they're charged with coming up with budget proposals from the governors and working with departments as well, they've also taken it upon themselves to think about equity questions that they can embed within their own budget change proposal process. Some of those questions include understanding the historical factors that have resulted in the inequities that we're seeing today. Perhaps those historical policies, perhaps they're no longer in existence, but we have to also acknowledge the legacies that they leave and ensuring that the solutions that we're crafting target those legacies, those continued disparities, and offer that solution. And in addition, ensuring that the intent or the proposal itself doesn't create other forms of disparities, ensuring that there is that equitable outcome, which then gets into the data piece. How do we ensure that we're actually meeting the goal of equity? Ensuring that the proposal has embedded within itself data collection requirements, and then also that those data elements are geared towards equity. I think a lot of the times, perhaps the data that we collect at the state system, it's more of an accounting form of data. How many applications are we getting? How many people are taking advantage of the program? That's not outcome-based. It doesn't tell us what impact did this program actually have on reducing institutionalizations, increasing people's ability to age in place. So ensuring that the data that we're measuring gets to that outcome, so then we can actually see, are we making an impact in reducing disparities?
Thank you so much, Jackie. We really appreciate all the work that you do.
Wow.
Next question we have is for Liz. As chair of the Assembly Committee on Aging and Long-Term Care, Assemblymember Nazzarian has endeavored to elevate the issues impacting California older adults and people with disabilities, especially affordability, access, and quality, among others. What recommendations do you have for stakeholders in how we can effectively advocate for these issues that often don't get the traction needed to advance systems change?
Well, first, I'd like to really thank my colleague Jackie here, because I think she just crushed it with her comments ahead. I think that Scott and I could probably just step down and let her finish. I also want to take a moment because I am very, very lucky to get to work with a department that is essentially the dream team. I think that I work with lots and lots of other policy committee consultants who gripe constantly about how they interface within the greater forms of government. And getting to work with the Department of Aging is exceptional. I think that to have had Kim, that I came in starting and learning the master plan, and as she has moved on and still helps me regularly, that I have Susan, I have Sarah, I have Adam. I think Laura makes the calendar wizardry magically happen. I've not only made friendships, but I think that when we talk about a department, you are small but incredibly mighty. And I think that you are the model for when we say government can work and does work. You're doing it every day. And I think that to be on the policy side and get to work with all of you is pretty incredible. So I'd like to just stop and say thank you. We, in this space, have been very, very grateful to get very little over a long period of time. In the human service field, we are very patient. We get in line. We take our time. We take those cuts. We're grateful that we aren't eliminated. And then we wait and wait and wait to see restoration. And we don't want to rock the boat. And that's a problem. And that's a problem because the aging and disability space is on such a faulty foundation, and it's such a fragmented care delivery system in any way that you look at it. So I think that there are a lot of different ways that we can look on ways that we can advocate for one another and ourselves. The first is, as we're always looking for an equity lens, I think that we need to use other partners who are also doing that. It doesn't need to start with us. My background is the majority of my career was spent with the Women's Caucus. They're doing a really, really good job of saying, how does this impact women? Let's partner with them. There's the Native Caucus, the Latino Caucus, the Black Caucus, the API Caucus. Let's let them help frame some of the diversity issues, and then let's ourselves champion and always ask policymakers to question, how does this impact disability, and how does this impact those that are growing older? That's our job. Sometimes I think that we are so accustomed to doing so many jobs and wearing so many hats and working beyond what we're paid to do that we think that we need to take on this entire system ourselves, and we don't. There are lots and lots of other people who are working in this space, and so let's find ways to partner. And the beauty is, I think that when you go and you work with those other caucuses, since I'm coming from within the legislature, you work with their other nonprofit partners, I think what you'll find is it will then help that within their own small reference, they're going to say, how does this impact those that are older within my subset? How does this impact those with disabilities within my subset? So if we're always asking those questions, I think that we're advancing policy in a much greater way. I think that most of the advocates in this room have chosen to do this as their life work, which is really rare. People often move around, but you're so entrenched in the world that you're in, you forget how hard it was to learn it at the beginning. We are going to have a flood of new legislators coming in. Even though I came from a time when term limits were even shorter, we have not had a turnover in this way before. And so I really, really encourage you to outreach early, but to anticipate that you should do kind of a 101 for your issues. Not try to assume this is your one meeting with them and you would like to discuss how all of the services for those that are growing older might impact in the 15 minutes that you have. Because what you're gonna find is that when it seems really hard and really confusing, they're gonna let someone else take it on. And we need to empower these legislators to understand that this is a quarter of the population. And so it should be important to every one of them. I would love it if there was an enormous line of members who wanted to be the chair of the committee that I work for. That's my goal. And there's some laughter I heard over there. That's my dream. But I think that I don't want to tell you to tone down your enthusiasm, because that's what makes you beautiful. But I would ask you to perhaps tone down what you hope to relay in those short meetings that you may get with a legislator or their staff. And to really be thinking about the long game, because you are in this for your life's work. I love that the master plan is a 10-year document. But we also, unfortunately, we can cannibalize one another in this budget. That when there's only so much money, if someone has a really, really powerful proposal and they can go in and they have a lot of power in their movement, it's hard to share it. And I think that sometimes when we can play the long game and recognize that we need to build on the foundation first, get a better foundation, and then we can build from there. But sometimes that means that we have to really collaborate, and that can be a tough thing to do. So I think it kind of answers.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I just want to reiterate how important not just these three up here are, but for many of us who are advocates in the third house, if you will, we depend on the staff behind the scenes. Oftentimes, it's the names, of course, of the legislators, the name, of course, of the governor who get the big billing, but it's the folks behind the scenes that are emailing early in the mornings, late at nights, on phone calls, on Zooms over the last several years, especially, that are able to be champions on our issues, and we really, really appreciate all of the work that you all do. So next, Scott. Scott, a consultant to the Senate Budget Committee, you are responsible for overseeing the Medi-Cal budget, which has undergone tremendous system change over the past few years through the development of the Cal-AIM initiative and recognizes the importance of social determinants of health. What do you think we need to do to ensure that the vision of Cal-AIM meets the needs of California's older adults and people with disabilities who often have the most significant health and functional needs?
Well, thanks, Eric, for the question. Before I get to Cal-AIM, I do want to echo Liz's comments. I mean, Department of Aging really is the dream team. I recall as the appointments were made, and the announcements were made over the past few years, just thinking, wow, these are incredible advocates that I've worked with in the past and have just been really, really passionate, talented people. And the team just keeps getting better and better. You've recently absconded ruthlessly with our human services consultant, Dr. Renina Polk, who's fantastic and amazing, which I'm sure you're already aware, and if you're not, you will be soon. But just looking around and seeing the advocacy in the community that you're able to sort of facilitate here is proof that you really are doing amazing work here, and I think everyone should really appreciate what it takes to get here. In terms of Cal-AIM, so you all heard from Dr. Pan, who we're all going to miss tremendously in the Senate. But when I first came to work in the Senate Budget Committee, he was my first chair of the Subcommittee on Health and Human Services, and we started meeting and talking about just priorities and things. And he said, why is it that we spend so much money when people are in the hospital and so little on prevention and keeping them out of the hospital? Why do we, as a state and a federal government and as a society, why do we spend so much money on the high utilization, the high cost, downstream negative outcomes, when we could be spending just as much money on prevention and keeping people stably healthy and happy and in the community? Why aren't we addressing social determinants of health? And so, when Cal-AIM was first being contemplated, we thought, all right, well, this is fantastic. We're finally going to reorient the direction of how the state does its health program. It's its big health program that covers 1/3 of all Californians, towards prevention. We're going to give these managed care plans the tools. And most folks are in managed care. I think we're up to like 88% or something are in managed care. We're going to give them the tools to try and get at the social determinants, at the things that land people in higher cost and higher acuity situations. And so, when we're thinking about, Cal-AIM is a huge transformation. But in a certain respect, Cal-AIM is kind of the beginning of a long process. We have all of these, we have the enhanced care management benefit, which is sort of building off of previous efforts, whole person care, health homes, and whatnot, and sort of building on the concept of kind of case management and helping people navigate a very complex set of different and overlapping systems. But these community supports that are these new benefits that are being provided through Cal-AIM are meant to get at that prevention side of the equation, and really meant to provide incentives for the structures within Medi-Cal to get at problems early and get at supporting people early enough that it makes a difference. And the way that we're going to be able to succeed in making this system work is to make sure that we are building the networks of the providers of these services in such a way that everybody is able to access them. Community supports are voluntary benefits for managed care plans. They're not required to offer them. Judging by the election documents that DHCS has provided, a lot of them are offering a lot of the really important ones, housing supports, transition services, rental subsidies and whatnot. But like I said, we are building a brand new structure. We are building brand new networks. And the reason why these are voluntary benefits is because the networks right now are just not there. When we've been going through the process of asking about, who's going to get these services, where are they going to be provided, and why can't we just make this a mandatory benefit that all managed care plans have to provide to everybody? And the answer is, well, we just don't have enough providers. So I think it's going to be important for us to, as we go through this process, identify the places, the methods, the modalities that are working really well in each of these different contexts, identify provider types, identify opportunities for training those provider types, and holding ourselves and the state and Medi-Cal accountable for getting us from where we are now, which is a nascent, albeit exciting opportunity to expand these benefits that get at the social determinants, and moving us progressively towards a place where there's enough that we can say, all right, this is now a Medi-Cal benefit. This is for everybody in every county, and everybody can benefit from this. And then we will really have transformed the system and transformed Medi-Cal.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So I just have a couple of other questions, and any of you all can answer them. I'll get started with this one. The COVID-19 pandemic has now lasted nearly 3 years. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services stated that long COVID is going to be considered a disability. The Center for American Progress predicted that there will be approximately 1.2 million more disabled people due to the impacts of COVID, especially with the symptoms of long COVID, which include brain fog, fatigue, chest pain, cough, loss of taste and smell, not to mention the trauma and potential depression from isolation. What should the legislature keep in mind as California begins to make this adjustment from this initial pandemic to people living with COVID, including long COVID?
For me, I think the first question that comes to mind is, how do we recognize and acknowledge the symptoms of long-term COVID with our existing eligibility rules, or how we qualify, or what we deem as a qualifying disability for existing programs like SSI, SSP, IHSS, and home supportive services, and ensure that those assessments capture what we learn about long-term COVID and are updated to reflect that. We already know that there are probably existing issues when it comes to disability determinations in these programs, so ensuring that we're not adding to those problems, the existing problems, and are being a bit more thoughtful and reacting in real time when it comes to dealing with the long-term effects COVID will have on the population.
Thank you.
I think the legislature should care about all of it. I think that some of the things that you just mentioned aren't long COVID, they're just COVID. I think that anyone in this room cannot deny that isolation and depression impacted the populations that we're here to talk about in the deepest and most meaningful ways. So I think oh, go ahead, give me lots of applause. I love it, bring it. I think that there are bills that we're working on, and some of them moved as far as we would have liked, some of them didn't. But but the conversations need to continue. I think that when you're talking about long COVID becoming, increasing numbers of disability, I think what we saw is isolation increased disability. People who were living with age-related illness didn't have impact or didn't have interaction with family and friends, and what did that do to their overall health outcomes? We are all a little farther along than we would like to have seen. And so I think that we can take that question and actually just take it back a couple steps and say, we need to care about all of this. We need to care about all of this because it's gone uncared for too long.
Yeah, I think, we're probably going to be dealing with the ongoing effects and the after effects of the pandemic for a very, very long time. And that's, back in 2020, my colleagues, I'm the health guy in the budget committee, so they're like, so what's, when do you think all of this will be over? And I said, well, it'll be over when people stop getting sick and people stop having to go to the hospital because of COVID. And at the time, I don't think we really understood that there was going to be this long COVID, that there was going to be chronic conditions in millions of people that were going to be triggered by infection with COVID-19. So, I think it's, I think we're still trying to figure out what to do about it. The things that come with long COVID, I think, are starting to be better understood. But like Jackie said, I think there are sort of existing issues that we need to deal with how somebody interacts with receiving services based on their on a disability that I think we need to deal with in the context of COVID and in the context of all of our programs.
Thank you, Scott. So this is going to be the last question. California leadership is going through a lot of changes in leadership. We have a lot of turnover in the legislature and staff. If you were us, disability advocates and aging advocates, what would you do to ensure that disability and aging remain a priority for the state in the immediate and moving forward?
I'd say, anytime you walk into a room and you let a legislator know whatever you do is going to impact 25% plus of the population, they are going to hear that in a very different way. So keep pushing that. I really can't stress enough how engagement early on is really helpful. There are a couple of advocates, I'm not sure if you're in the room. We started working on a policy for the coming legislative session, and we started in May. And that's because it's going to be a whopper, and the worst thing that you can do is introduce the bill in February, and I read about it first in that way. I think that you would, if you haven't already tried to engage with legislative staff, we are a very accessible group of people. I have my cell phone in my signature line. I Zoom with people from my laundry room, which is my home office, regularly. And I think that if you left here with one thing, it would be to try to collaborate within your smaller groups, figure out how you work within the bigger group, and start getting some meetings on the calendar. It's never too early. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think getting to talk to us as early as possible, I think, is important, because I think in the budget committee, we see a lot of proposals, especially in health and human services. We, get hundreds of different types of proposals. And I think the ones that are distinguished, the ones that make it, say, into the budget versus ones that don't, are the ones who have really spent a lot of time getting organized, understanding how the programs that they're hoping to impact work, how they're funded, what the staff who run those programs do to implement them so that they can figure out whether there's, something needs to be a new program, something needs to be a tweak to an existing program. And I think the ones that are the proposals that are really the most organized and have really spent a lot of time getting into the nitty-gritty details of how you run a program in state government are the ones who end up being successful. But even once you've done that much work, a lot of times it can take a while. And so what I would also advise is to never give up. When we finally, as a state, eliminated the senior penalty in Medi-Cal, it was not the first year that proposal had been proposed to the legislature, to the governor, to the administration. It had been proposed for years. And I don't know, it may have been the change in framing to call it the senior penalty, I don't know, or whatever it was, but there was a moment, there was a window that opened, and after years and years and years of passionate advocacy, that moment allowed it to move forward, and it happened. So sometimes it may seem like, and a lot of us thought, oh, this is never gonna happen. They're gonna keep saying no, there's never gonna be enough money. And then there was, and then it happened. And we were all so happy and thrilled when it did. But really, it was just the passionate advocacy and the unwillingness to give up on the issue that I think pushed it over the edge. So, so don't give up. Wait for your moment, because it will eventually happen if you're on the right side of things.
Well, I just want to thank this panel, Jackie, Liz, and Scott, for a tremendous discussion on these issues. Thank you so much.
And I want to join Eric, first thanking Eric for moderating, and to thank Jackie, Liz, and Scott for never giving up on us, because these are people that have made it their life's work as well, to work in health and human services, aging, and disability. So thank you. Thank you for everything you've done in your roles and what you're going to do in the years ahead. We now have a 15-minute break. It's a chance to leave the room. We have refreshments and snacks in the lobby area, and we will return for the closing session where we want to hear from you. So please don't leave early, because we wouldn't hear from you. We'll see you back here in about 15 minutes.